for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so first item on the agenda, and I want to thank everyone, first of all the folks on screen tonight. We got quite a crowd from the school with teachers and principals and administrators and so forth. So thank you for coming. Meeting, and we've got a lot to cover tonight. So let's start with the consent agenda. We need a motion requested for the consent agenda. We have two meeting minutes, one from January 5th, a regular meeting minutes of the Board of Ed, and then a special meeting on February 1st, Board of Education. So do we have a motion? Trevor, you're unmuted, and
So moved.
Okay, thank you.
I'm waiting here.
It looks like we have Trevor and Karina second that. Is that correct?
Yes. We had to unmute ourselves.
Yes. Okay. So any discussion? Any opposed? All those in favor by show of hand? So looks like we have everyone, no one's opposed, then the motion passed. Thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have our presentations from our administrators regarding the school climate and how the building goals related to the climate and the district strategic plan link. So we have principals Riffle, Bachman, Anastasio, and am I missing anyone? We have Jen, and we have a second Heston. I'm sorry, could you introduce yourself and Manoon?
Sure. Hi, I'm Denise Tedesco. I'm the school counselor at Goodwin.
Okay, thank you. Nice to meet you. And Amity. So Heston, would you like to start off with your presentation first?
Yes, of course. Thank you,
Thank
Alan.
you.
And my colleague Denise Tedesco, our school counselor, is here as she introduced herself. What I'm going to do is share my screen so that everyone can see my portion of the presentation. So that should be coming right up. I hope.
Good one. Maybe I can bring it up. Heston, let me share my screen and see if that works, and then you can deny, record this screen, computer, deny that. Not letting me share it either.
Yeah, it's taking me into system preferences. I guess I've never shared.
Heston, I have it ready to go if you'd like for me to drive this for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, give me 1 second here.
Thanks, Trent. Very good.
Yeah. No problem.
Let me share either. That's weird.
All
There we
right.
go.
Let me just put this into presentation mode, and so everybody see it?
Nice. Very good.
So Heston, whenever you're ready for me to go forward, just give me a verbal cue and I'll run forward for you.
Go ahead, you can move on to the next one. So like everything that we do, we always connect back to the strategic plan, and you will see with all of our climate goals and building goals and such are all related. So we're all familiar with our goals of equity, high quality instruction, and safe and supportive environment. So as I run through this presentation, you'll be hearing about the goals and how everything is connected back to the strategic plan. Next slide. As you know, that our building goals are also tied directly back to the strategic plan. So at Goodwin School, with equity, we're working with Dr. Rydell Harrison, who's doing our training this year. We're looking to increase our level of instruction by embedding 21st century skills. And we are assessing and addressing student needs continuously throughout the building. So that is how we are related with our building goals back to the strategic plan. Go ahead, Trent. So the next series of slides you're going to see is going to be data from what we collected from our surveys. The top pie chart you'll see is labeled 2nd through 4th grade, and the bottom pie chart is labeled K and 1. And the questions are also on the slides. We gave 2 separate surveys. Obviously, second through 4th grade have a series of questions that are a little bit more advanced than K and 1. But in some cases, they relate directly, and in some cases, they relate a little bit loosely, and I'll point them out. You'll also notice that the agree and strongly agree, I put them as the same color just to help us see the slides a little bit more clearly. And this question, my teachers care about me, it came out to 96% of our students in 2nd through 4th grade reported they agreed or highly agreed, and same with our K and 1. It was 98% of our students agreed with that. We can go on to the next slide. So this is connected to our well-being, and again, it's divided by the 2 surveys. So the question was, I can resolve problems with friends, and you can see that 98% of our students agreed with that. And in K and 1, 92% of our students agreed with that. And that's strong data. That means students are feeling good about controlling their own environment and working with their friends and working through problems together with their peers. Next slide. So the next question, I can understand, express my own emotions appropriately. And as you know, we've worked diligently through the pandemic on our social and emotional health. So students reported here that 96% of students in 2nd through 4th grade agreed or strongly agreed. And in K and 1, 90% of the students agreed or strongly agreed that they can talk about their feelings at school. Next slide. And I hand this one off to Denise.
So in this slide, the question was for the high level instruction. My teachers teach me to welcome new challenges, even if they are hard. Heston, I think this was your slide because I don't have the combination there. What is your combined percentage on that one, Heston? Because that wasn't mine.
Yeah, 98% there.
98%. And then
Yep.
for the K and 1, we have 89%.
And 89%.
And that one is phrased a little bit differently. That one would be phrased, my teacher asks me to do hard things. Obviously, it's phrased a little bit differently for the younger kiddos, but that one was at 89%. The next slide was also well-being and equity. And for that question, we asked the kids at my school have the same opportunities regardless of their abilities. And for that one, we got 95% agreed and strongly agreed.
Right. And that question was only asked through 2nd through 4th grade. That's why you only see one pie chart.
Right.
Trent, you go on to the next one. Kids at my school have the same opportunities regardless of their income. So our students thinking about a differentiation between their income. This orange part should have been, I didn't color that one blue as well, but combining those 2, we can see that 97% of students think that regardless of their peers' income, that they agree or strongly agree that it doesn't really make a big difference. They can still access their learning. Next slide.
All right. And this one, again, is for 2nd and 4th graders. And the question was, teachers meet all students' learning needs. 95% of the students agreed, strongly agreed on that one as for that question.
Next one, Trent. This one had to do with, I know what I am learning and why I'm learning it. And this is something we spend a lot of time on discussing in classrooms. So students are aware of, why am I actually learning this, and how does this apply to my life, or how does this apply to the community or the greater world? And this was one of our highest. 99% of kids agreed or strongly agreed that they are in the know. Next slide.
This one's broken down again into second through fourth and then K and 1. For the first pie chart, you'll see it's for second through fourth grade, and it's asking or questioning, most adults in school push me to keep getting better. 95% of second through fourth graders felt that way. And for K and 1, we asked, by teachers expect me to do my best, whereas they felt 98% of K and 1 students agreed or strongly agreed to that question.
Thank you, Denise. The next 3 slides are expanded a bit. These were slides that showed some data that was a little concerning to us. And we decided to build some goals off of these next series of questions. So at this school, students have lots of chances to help decide things like class activities and rules. And you can see 23% of students reported that they either disagreed or strongly disagreed. And this speaks to students feeling like they have a voice in the classroom. 77% agreed or strongly disagree or strongly agreed, rather. So it's not horrible data, but it's in comparison to our other questions, this one certainly stood out, and we want to focus on this one and build some goals on it. Next slide. This question was also concerning to us. Students respect one another. And this has to speak to, students' well-being. And the concerning data here is that 17% disagree. And again, the data is not a disaster, but it's high enough that we raised an eyebrow at it. And also looking back at some previous data from 2019 to 2020, the question was a bit different, and it's connected loosely, but it's enough to make us say we have more work to do in this area. And this was students getting away with misbehavior. And this was a result of a teacher survey. And you can see the 29% in 2019 and 39% in 2020. So that went up, and we're at 17% with this respect one another. So we're gonna take a deeper dive into this data as well. Next slide, Trent. The last concerning area, and this one's tricky, but the question reads, I have seen friends being hurt at school. It doesn't really differentiate how kids got hurt, but it says I've seen kids hurt at school. And 77% of kids said, yes, I've experienced other kids being hurt at school. So that arrow should have been really on the 77%, not on the 23%. And, also looking back at some other data from 2019 to 2020, we see that, kids did report one time per year, one time per month, experiencing school violence. So we're gonna do a deeper dive here as well. Trent? So our 3 goals, like I said, are going to focus around increasing student voice and choice, increasing students' awareness of respecting peers, and teaching students how to respond in these instances when they see friends are hurt. We can go on to the challenges, Trent. So with any survey, with young students, you wonder, do they really have a deep understanding of each survey question? So we imagine that, some students may not fully understand all the questions. And we realize that in 2 of these 3 areas, we may have to give a more detailed survey. And at this age also, students, we know that in the morning, life can be a complete disaster. And by the afternoon or just a few minutes later, they can have forgotten all about it and have moved on. So depending how students were feeling in the moment, it can vary on a survey such as this. Some of this data is developmentally appropriate. Kids in elementary school sometimes get hurt out at recess, and things happen, and part of that are the lessons of life and learning from your failures. And developmentally, we know that students are hands-on at this age. They're very tactile, and we also know that students perceive touch differently and perceive motives differently as to kids getting hurt and why that may have happened. So those are some of the challenges that we outlined, and Denise is going to speak to some of our successes.
Yeah, so it was nice to see that they could recognize some of the things that are going well for them. Some of the things that they, shared, as you could see, was that they feel the teachers care about them, and they recognize that. that they can also solve problems with their friends and they feel safe to express their emotions. And personally, that's one that I really am happy about. That they welcome challenges and recognize, the teacher challenges that when they are challenged. And again, I think that's important personally, building some resiliency here. All their successes were in grades 2 through 4. They were indicating the ability to, realize that their level and income are not, are not creating issues with their learning. And, they also report that their teachers do meet their learning needs, which I feel, is a good step in the right direction, that the teachers, that the students do feel that coming from their teachers. And yeah, those were some good reporting there. So we were happy to hear that.
Trent, on to next steps. So we're going to continue. We have a second step curriculum, which is a social skills curriculum that is taught at Goodwin that will continue. And at times, depending on the needs of the classroom, those lessons are personalized. I don't know if you all remember the buddy bench, but that is a system for outside at recess. Our restorative practices are strong. Our discipline is restoring relationships and making good on some mistakes, perhaps. And this summer, a school-wide training is going to begin with responsive classroom. And that's in the social emotional school-wide program that we've been waiting for quite some time. So that's all going to continue. And like I said, we have 3 goals, and we're going to look more closely at student voice and choice, and have teachers reflect and list opportunities in their classroom, and really make students more aware of where they do have voice and choice. We're also going to look into the respect piece and increase students' awareness of respecting their peers. And if you're aware of like bucket filler type activities, where students realize that either you're adding to someone's bucket or you're taking away from someone's bucket. So making sure that all classrooms have some type of activity surrounding that. And then lastly, seeing friends heard at school. We're gonna administer another survey that speaks more about where they see kids getting hurt. Is it an accident? Is it on purpose? And so we can address that a little bit more and plan next steps. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. And Denise and I welcome any of your questions or comments.
Yep, so I have some questions. I don't know if you can see me or hear me.
I can hear you.
You can? So Alan, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Arlene.
Yep, we can hear you.
Super. I just can't see anybody. Anyway, so my question really, number one, how was the survey developed? Is it a standardized survey on climate? And my other questions were that I felt that some of those questions seemed to me that they embedded vocabulary that I think some of these children might not even be aware of. To ask, a question of a kindergartner, first grader, or second or fourth about income. I mean, is that exactly how the survey was given, or do students have an opportunity to learn about what income means? How is it given to them? What does it mean, to respect each other? Is that just they took this survey? I don't even know how it was really presented, or how was it presented to students? Did they really even know what respect is? So do they get an opportunity to learn about that word? Because that's a very sophisticated word.
So yes, all those questions you asked, we did anticipate. So we developed a strategic plan and climate survey jointly. And for Goodwin School, I sat with the building principals as well as Amity, and we modified the questions for the grade level. The surveys were administered by teachers, and they went question by question, and at times defined vocabulary and answered questions about the vocabulary. They did their best to make sure that all students understood what they were answering. So that was part of our strategy to be as accurate as possible. The term respect is something that is used daily at Goodwin School. It is a term that is defined daily. It's something that we speak to children about daily, even in early childhood program. So that type of vocabulary is used often. If they were confused, Eileen, teachers were on hand to define it.
So was it given to the students orally? How did they raise their hand, or how do you get the responses?
teacher read the question, and students either in grades two through 4 were able to answer electronically, and in K and 1 there was a hard copy. So the question was read aloud, and then students asked questions and then answered the question.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do you want me to take over, Alan, fielding the questions? I'm going to take Alan's silence as a yes. Karina, I saw you next up in the hand up queue.
Thanks, Tara. This is sort of redundant, so I apologize, but I was under the impression that it was a standardized test, but what I hear is that you guys really developed the questions, and I think that all the questions were fine. I too, though, would be concerned about that 2nd through 4th graders really, in my estimation, have no concept of income, and
Right.
nor would they know how to judge that appear, that just seems like a really odd measure for children of that age. So it's really just a comment, not really a question. Thanks.
Thanks, Karina. Karen, I saw your hand up next.
Well, yeah, I just really, it's in this exact same vein. I mean, what jumped out at me was, and I know that Heston, you noted that in your challenges that all kids may not have understood the questions. That income one certainly jumped out at me as well. I can't imagine a whole lot of 2nd graders understanding that. So I'm wondering if, and you did say that teachers were available for questions. Can teachers give, for example, a simple scenario description of what it might look like, for example?
So teachers were concerned about that question as well. And so what they often did was say, does it matter what kind of sneakers or how someone dresses or what they have for belongings? If they have real fancy clothes or regular clothes, does that matter to students here as to what students may have or what students might not have? And the reason we included some of those questions that were a bit more difficult is, again, we're trying to have some uniformity throughout the district. But yes, it is a challenge, and Karina and Karen, you're absolutely right. So it did require a gentle hand to explain that.
Okay, and as long as, it makes sense that the teachers did explain it, because sometimes the surveys is just so cut and dry and everybody gets the same language and it is what it is. So,
Right.
At least at your level, they're taking the time to expand a bit, because some of these questions would be tough for little ones to answer, certainly. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I think Amity put in comments that that was a required question. Amity, is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some that are required by the Connecticut Department of Ed, and then the rest of the questions were either directly from a U.S. Department of Ed survey that they created on climate, or were modified actually to make them easier to understand. But these were all questions that were not, we didn't locally generate them, we just compiled them.
Thanks, Amity.
That's helpful. That's helpful to know. So they came from a database. They came from somewhere.
Mhm.
Steve, I saw your hand up next.
Thank you. Just kind of jumping in, reiterating, I know my 3rd grader really doesn't have any concept of income. He thinks I'm a millionaire and can just buy anything that he wants. But, you mentioned through some of your presentation and the talk on equity stance and working with Dr. Rydell Harrison, I did a quick Google search, led me to the Partners for Educational Leadership. Did any of these questions come through work with Dr. Rydell Harrison, Dr. Harrison?
No, the questions did not come from him. His training is with the staff this year, and that is district-wide, including, administration.
Okay.
So he is looking and helping us focus on equity issues in various different areas of education.
So is Dr. Harrison working with all of the schools and all of the staff?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. I'll follow up some more on that later.
Thanks, Steve. Karen, I saw your hand up again.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up for Amity. You mentioned that we are required to categories that we are required to ask questions on survey. So, but do we have any discretion in how we present the question, what language we use, or is it standard language that we are required to ask? Did I say that clearly or not? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I understand that there are, I always get the number wrong. I think it's 6, but somebody feel free to correct me. There are a handful of questions that we have to ask using exactly the language that the state gives us.
Okay.
And we ask those questions every year, and every year they create problems because they are not well-worded questions.
Okay.
The other questions, we tried not to change them too much because we realized that the U.S. Department of Education, when they put together a climate survey, has put that through metrics and measures and validity measures and things like that, that we would not know how to do or be able to do locally. And so we tried not to mess with them too much, but we did, work to kind of pare down the language and make them as clear as we could without really changing the meat of the question.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Steve, did you have a follow-up question? No. Okay. Other questions or comments? Oh, I see you, Eileen. Go ahead.
No, just a question maybe can be clarified at another time that Dr. Rydell Harrison is from. I think I met him when maybe at the convocation earlier. Where is he from?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, where is he from?
Partners for
Oh, go ahead, Amity.
Partners for Educational Leadership, Eileen.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, and so do the teachers get training before they give this assessment? I'm just talking about Goodwin right now. Is this different? They're just separate and apart.
It's different. Yeah, that he's part of different professional development. I think that we had received a presentation on earlier this year. So that's not to do with this survey.
Right. So equity is a district level goal for the strategic plan. And so therefore, Dr. Rationale Harrison is here to address the entire district and Amity? Oh, I thought you were shaking your head no. So he is training the entire district, although it's only happened for 1/3 of people so far at Goodwin.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, I know I'm new to the board and I'm kind of late to all this party. I just, I'm reviewing their website and some of their beliefs on equity work and their highlights, and I'm uncomfortable with that. So
it's probably a discussion for another time, Steve, because that is separate from like tonight's presentation. But that is certainly an appropriate question to ask about, and I'll be happy to have Jan follow up with you on what their purpose is.
Okay.
I think it'd be good for everybody, Dara.
Okay.
I'd be interested as well. Yeah.
Yep, we can put that back on as an agenda item for a future meeting then.
Thanks so much.
Yep. All right, other questions about Heston's presentation before we move on? All right. So since I came in late, and I apologize for being late, I assume we started with Goodwin. Are we moving to the middle school next, Alan? Yeah, okay. All right, Krista, take it away.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight, our presentation is focusing on the climate within the middle school. And really what we did when we chose our data is we looked at previous data and data from this fall and compiled that together to really paint a picture of some of the strengths of the middle school and some of the areas that we find that may be challenges that we're going to continue working to improve to make sure that our school is a safe and academic place where the kids can learn and grow, not just their academics, but their relationships and themselves as well. And I'd also like to introduce, before we go too much further, Jen Pesh is our school climate.
How are you?
She's our school climate chair, and she's going to be helping with this presentation this evening and is really in charge of running our school climate committee for our building. So I will turn it over to Jen.
Thank you, Krista. So just to quickly go through the goals and the rationale for this year's climate survey, we identified some strengths and some growth opportunities. Our strengths continue to be safety, friends and belonging, and a positive and supportive learning environment. We have a lot of data that supports that. As far as the growth opportunities are concerned this year, voice and choice in learning was an area that was flagged based upon students' responses, as well as a deeper understanding of inequities at OSMS. You can advance to the next slide, please. Thank you.
All right. So when it comes to our strategic plan, we feel that the survey kind of represents some of those different areas. As far as the equity, we're still at the stage of really diving into better understanding the equity or possibly inequity within our own building. We are continuing our work with improving students' opportunities for voice and choice, which falls under that high quality instruction of the strategic plan. I mentioned this at our last meeting when we were talking about some of the ways that teachers are starting to integrate choice, not just in how students show their learning, but along the learning process as well. And of course, it connects to a safe and supportive environment that we are looking for, that wellness for all of our students, that they feel connected and safe while they are at school, so they can do their best learning and grow their whole selves, not just their academic selves. The connection to our building goals. Our first one is by utilizing the learning targets and formative assessment data with students. We are increasing agency and ownership by providing them with opportunities for choice in learning and demonstration of learning. So again, this goes back to having students better understand where they are academically in relation to the learning targets for that particular unit, and giving them some opportunities, not just how they demonstrate their learning, which I think we've done pretty well with, but also along the pathway of their learning process and how they learn or what areas they need to focus on while they're learning. Our second connection to our building goals is student input. We are looking for them regularly to be involved, especially in the areas of our SEL, PBIS, and restorative practices in the building. And we're also looking to personalize and provide educational equity by utilizing the formative assessment data to make sure that we are providing all students with the right support, but also pushing all students forward so that they're making academic progress, whether they are learners that need additional support or if they are farther along in that learning process.
All right, so as Krista had mentioned earlier, we have a variety of data here for you tonight. So this longitudinal data comes from previous surveys that have been administered. The most recent one was in late May or early June of last academic year. And so those statistics for that question from the middle school survey for climate, which, of course, will no longer be given now that we've moved to the district-wide one, had a measure that we were interested in following regarding safety. And as you can see, the numbers have trended upward from 2017, 2018 academic school year regarding students feeling safe in school through last year and the academic year prior, where they were pretty even. So we were very pleased to see that the vast majority of the children at OSMS feel very safe there, and that there was only a small number of students who disagreed with that statement. We'll talk a little bit more after we review all of the data regarding how some of those areas that tend to pop that we'll be showing you tonight will be addressed so that we can continue to work towards increasing students' feelings of safety, belonging, having voice and choice, so on and so forth in the building. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So our next slide is regarding friends and belonging. This question has morphed with the new survey, but for the last few years, the question read, I feel very connected and have many friends. That data was especially, I think, illuminating and comforting, seeing that nearly 99% of the children agreed with that statement as of the end of last academic year. This year, when we administered the strategic plan survey, that number changed a little bit. And it's hard to tell if there's truly a change, I think, in attitude, or if it just wasn't reflected in the way that the question was asked, which was that I have friends at this school. The number of children who disagree is up a little bit. I don't know that it's statistically significant, but it's certainly something that we address through SEL work and pride activities with the students. We can advance to the next slide. Thank you. This next area is positive and supportive learning environment. Again, we have the longitudinal data that we've been collecting up through the end of last school year, and those numbers have stayed fairly consistent within a point or two. What we noticed, though, in the fall administration is with the change in the question to my teachers care about me, that we saw quite a dip with 13.4% of the students disagreeing with that statement and only 86.6% agreeing. So this is an area for growth, certainly, and we'll talk a bit more about that too. We're ready for the next one on voice and choice in learning. This one definitely is an area where the kids have expressed some concern with feeling as though they may not have as much voice and choice, I think, as they believe they should have, or maybe wish they had. And I can certainly provide you with some anecdotes based upon end of unit assessments and reflections that many of us give across the grade levels that speak to perhaps why the kids feel like they're disenfranchised. But the fact remains that our data are what they are, and that as recently as this fall, only 83.5% of them felt that they had input into the process of their learning and how they demonstrated their learning. Again, I'll speak some more about how that will be addressed when we get a little bit further into the presentation. We have one last slide on data with regard to equity. These again are the newer questions. So there were 6 areas that the kids were asked to evaluate whether or not they had the same opportunity for, regardless of the following categories. They looked at gender, language, abilities, race, ethnicity, income, and identity. And you can see how those fall out with that bar graph. I was pleasantly surprised to see how high race and ethnicity scored, and very surprised at the gender score. I think since this is brand new data and that there is a district goal around understanding inequity at the school, and a lot of work being done to really investigate just the district on a whole as a place that makes all children feel included and valued, that we're going to hear more about this. So it'll just be interesting to see what that work looks like once the Equity Coalition Committee's work is done, and as that evolves across the rest of this year. All right, so we have just a couple of more slides for the middle school. Our next one is challenges and successes, and Krista is going to speak to that one.
Yes, and I would say when it comes to middle school, it is often appropriate that students need ongoing support and guidance in navigating their peer relationships. And I would say even sometimes navigating their relationships with adults as well. So we continue to use restorative practices quite a bit to help teachers and students, and sometimes even more often students and students, come together to kind of discuss some of the concerns and help empower students to identify how they're going to move forward together, whether it's repairing a relationship, repairing the damage that was done because of a particular incident, or setting expectations for how they're going to treat each other going forward. And that's an important part that we want the students to be involved with. It gives them the opportunity to learn some empathy skills, some problem solving, and some communication skills, as well as they are navigating adolescence. We also find, I think, that the uncertainty and some of the protocols that we had to put in place because of COVID has caused some things to be a little bit more challenging for our students. Last year, they were in cohorts, so they didn't have the opportunity to mingle with their peers very much. This year, that's changed, but now they're still kind of relearning some of that. And I think we find that we're still continuing to support students with that. But as a result, I think we have a lot of new supports in place that will continue to stay. And that kind of brings us to some of our successes as we've learned to navigate this strange world that we are currently in. So we've added an SEL coordinator, as you know, that's a district level piece. And she's been very helpful in supporting us with identifying students with maybe some social emotional needs, identifying ways that we can look at that data, as well as supporting us with our advisory program Pride and putting together lessons that are going to support those students. We also hired a full-time social worker at the middle school that started this year. She has been extremely helpful to us. She not only supports individual students, but does groups, supports teachers in classrooms, helps teachers better understand ways to support students. So her outreach has been very important in making this year successful. Another success really is that we've been open since October of 2020. So I think that our students probably are better off than so many in other school districts where they've been closed. We continue to have the presence of clinical staff from youth and family. This year, I believe we have 4 interns in our building that run lunch bunches, small group, and individual counseling sessions. They're involved in things in the classrooms. They have been extremely helpful in many ways in supporting our students as we've gone through this difficult time lately. We have increased SEL instruction and provided teachers and students with strategies on how to be mindful, address anxiety, and so forth. In the fall, we had a big SEL kickoff day that was part of our Pride. Again, Leah, who is our SEL coordinator, was a part of that. That was a really great day for the kids to be able to enjoy each other's company, learn some great things about themselves, and really kick off our focus on SEL this year. We've updated our PBIS programming in the fall. So as you may remember from the past, PBIS is positive behavior interventions and supports, and it's a way of teaching students the expectations within a building, providing them with positive feedback when they are meeting those expectations, and putting in systems of interventions when students are struggling. And we often do that through our consult process as well. And I would say that we also have our good participation in our school climate committee. Students, parents, teachers, paras, SRO, all participate in school climate. And I believe that that partnership across the building has been able to help support our students as they go through middle school.
All right, now our next steps really build on some of those challenges and successes that Krista mentioned, and I think speak to just some of the numbers with that data that we talked about. So really continuing that SEL instruction and strategies for staff and students is going to be paramount, I think, to really ensuring that the kids feel like their needs are heard and that they have adults in the building who listen to them and truly care about them. And I want to reiterate what Krista said with regard to where kids are developmentally at this point in school, just that notion that they really need that assistance with navigating relationships in general. They're going through so much. They're changing so much. Puberty can't be understated, along with the social pressures that they experience, as their relationships with their peers evolve. So that work that we're doing, I think, is really critical. One of the other ways that we continue to work to give kids some voice in just the way we do our business at school is to continue working with the student executive board to provide them with that opportunity for direct communication with the building administrators. And then that way, they have a forum where they can go to and voice concerns about cell phone use policy, or, whether or not they feel the mask rules are too strict, what have you, but it really is that forum to have some dialogue. We've done so much work this year and last year around really increasing student choice and voice in learning, particularly with the work that we've done with experiential learning and the open way learning folks. And that's been a really incredible opportunity, I think, for the children. And I think the more exposure that they have to additional experiential learning opportunities, and they see that they have a lot more latitude in the way that they're able to demonstrate what they know, will really empower them and make them feel as though they truly have a lot more control over how they're able to communicate and show the knowledge that they've gained. Finally, the work that we had talked about with the Equity Coalition, that's going to go a long way, I think, in helping the kids to feel like OSMS is a place where all kids are valued equally. And I think there's something to really be said for that. It's interesting to me to see how some of our students really are just so wonderfully accepting. So I was pleased with a lot of those numbers. But I do think that we probably have some work to do so that everybody feels like they have a safe place with us. Finally, we'll continue to work on student choice based on data. We've done a lot of work as a faculty, just doing CFAs to really judge where kids are with what they know, and really trying to fine tune, finding ways to optimize their opportunities in class, to really demonstrate that. So we're doing a lot of great work, and I think we're thankful to have the support of the district in being able to continue to move forward and really provide great programming for the kids. Thank you. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to say, Krista.
No, I think we'll open it up for any questions that folks have.
Great, thanks, Krista and Jen. Eileen, I see your hand.
Yeah. So I think the whole concept of dealing with climate is essential, and it's important. And I'm glad that it's being assessed. I have some questions again for the middle school. Question, maybe Amity can answer this, or whomever. I was curious to know, for instance, in the fall, they might ask a question like, I have friends at this school. And then at a later date, it said the question changed, and it said, I feel very connected and have many friends. So that's different. And I guess I'm questioning a little bit about that. Those are both two different kinds of questions. And I would imagine you'd want to have the same question so that you could be able to see the improvement. And so again, I would wonder whether, what does connected mean? Again, it's abstract. And
Right.
how
So-
are children learning about that? Now, that's my first question.
Yeah, I can answer that. So we did have a different survey prior to this year, and this year we decided to align our surveys across the buildings and have them aligned to the strategic plan. So that's one piece. I think that particular question, what we tried to do is identify similar themes within the questions, even though the questions didn't align exactly. We will continue with the same questions we did in the fall going forward so that we can see that growth. And I do think that there's probably a difference in some of the questions because our prior surveys were administered in the spring. And this one was administered in the fall. So I would be very interested to see what these numbers look like in the spring. Given the fact that the students just returned to school, they had not been there too long, they had not had as much time to develop relationships with their friends or with their teachers for that fact. So I will be interested to see how that changes over the time. And your question about connectedness and students understanding the questions, what we did at the middle school is all of the questions were on a Google form. And the teachers went and actually read through the questions with the kids and explained what the questions mean. So the students had the opportunity to ask questions if they didn't understand, and that the teachers could explain vocabulary if it was confusing for middle schoolers.
Yeah, because my second question was, overall, my school is positive and a supportive place to learn versus my teachers care about me. So I appreciate the fact that you're maybe going to try to standardize the questions so that you can get, the responses may be different in the fall than in the spring, as opposed, because I think they both mean different things. And so that's important to know when you're assessing and what you're assessing. That's only my perspective.
Yes.
In terms of vocabulary and making sure that you're getting the information that you want. Because I think those are two different questions. My other question is, how do you choose your student executive board? And are they made up of students from 5, 6, 7, and 8?
Well, the executive board is typically members of the 8th grade class. And they choose themselves basically within the 8th grade. It's not a popularity contest. It's really who wants to join and be a part of it. And then they have to show that they are willing to do the work. And then within the group, for the people that show up, then those are the ones that they nominate each other for different roles in those positions. I know that does mean that it's more 8th grade. The 8th grade definitely is involved in a lot more of activity planning and so forth. That's why it is focused more on the 8th grade. But I meet regularly with kids at all grade levels.
Okay, because I know that one of your maybe goals was with student input, you want to bridge, voice and choice, bridge SEL, PBIS to support students' social and emotional learning. So I was curious to know about the representation and how you were getting student, input from all of those grades and how it's gathered.
Well, the survey is actually one of the ways that we do that. But we talk to students across the board regularly. When they come in my office, I'll often ask them even simple questions about what they're learning and how they're learning and how things went. I ask them when I'm in observations in classrooms about their learning process and what's happening in the classroom at that moment in time and how that relates to them personally. So there's a lot of places where we gather that information.
And just lastly, and I appreciate your openness to share your perspective, professional perspective is, let me see what I was going to actually say here, or I may have to come back to this question, but you can continue with other people's questions. Oh, I know, sorry, that with your voice and choice, which seems to be a common theme, which is exciting, and maybe this will be addressed at a different time. So whomever is providing that training, will they be taking what students might have a choice to be able to make decisions about, or showing teachers how in this case you could provide more choice and voice?
So we've been doing that in-house. Experiential learning has offered some opportunities for that, but we wanted to make sure that everybody, because not all teachers are involved in experiential learning. So what we've done as a faculty is looked at our own learning process and what it's looked like in the past to what it looks like now, and started to identify formative assessments that teachers can use to basically gather data about where students are in their learning process in a particular unit towards particular standards, and then offering students choice along the way based on where they are with that particular formative assessment. And teachers have been doing a lot of collaboration with each other and sharing their ideas and sharing the formative assessments as well as their lesson plans for ways that they can do that. So that's ongoing work that we're going to continue to do. And one of the things that I heard some teachers say is, well, no, we started this and we did it with a lesson, and now I feel like I have to rewrite my whole unit. And that takes a lot of time. Yes, it does. But the fact that that's where they're headed to, and seeing that I'm starting to realize that it's not just this, I need to really change how I'm doing the whole process, I think is heading us in the right direction there. So that although it's a big undertaking and is going to require time for planning and so forth, that's something that we feel is valuable, and teachers, I think, are seeing the benefits of it in the classroom.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Eileen. Steve, I saw your hand up next.
Thank you. I'm just going to follow up again on equity. In the presentation, I was very happy to see the race at 94%, 94.7% agree. Do we have any comparisons to other school districts in the state as to where that ranking is with other schools, and what is our goal, if we're going to be focusing on that?
Well, I think right now our goal is to better understand where there may be inequities, whether it's race, gender, so forth. I think that gives us one data point. I do wonder with the percentages of students that may fall into one of those categories, that may shift or skew the data that comes out. I think that may be the reason why gender was a little higher, because we have students, they fall into one of those categories somewhere along the line. And, if, about 50% are girls, and maybe we have more students that may feel that impact. Whereas some of the other groups may be much smaller. So it may look different in the data as well. They may not feel the impact of some of those, but I do think it's something that we need to better understand. And really, I think our goal right now is to learn more about it and understand where there may be inequities in our building.
Right. Well, so doesn't answer the question. Do we have comparative data to other school districts in the state?
I do not have comparative data. I don't know if Amity does. These were questions that we have for our building, so I don't know if we have anything that's comparable. And Amity looks like she's shaking her head no.
But these are based on defined questions from the Department of Education and things like that.
Some of the questions are, not all of them.
Right, but earlier we talked about that none of these were created in-house.
No, that's not true. Some of these were chosen, and we utilized other surveys to be able to gather some of those questions to put them together. But it was a combination of our questions as well as the state questions.
Mr. Sutman, was your program, were any of them created in-house, or were they all taken from other sources? Because I was under the impression earlier when we were talking about you that some of them were, that they were all taken from other sources that had been vetted and that they had been, statistically analyzed and so forth. Or did
some of the questions come from the state that we have to ask. Okay. The other questions are created by us.
Okay. I must have heard different. I'll have to check too. Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Following back up on gender, I just wanted to say I can definitely see where that is an issue. My stepdaughter was a female student in the middle school. Equity-wise, it was very simple. I used to get very upset with the quality of the programs afforded for girls versus boys, specifically baseball versus softball. I remember the girls would come out in ragged uniforms, looking horrible, the field's in poor condition, and the baseball would be great. And I always wondered why. So I could see where some of that, unless that's changed significantly, which I haven't heard, I can see why there's some disparity there.
On that specific issue right now, if I could speak to it just for a moment, our athletic director I believe, has put all of our teams on a cycle of replacement for uniforms, regardless of gender. And I see Mr. Anastasio nodding his head, and he's the direct report. The athletic director is the direct report to Mr. Anastasio, Mr. Walton. The other thing could be, Stephen, this is a little bit of conjecture on my part. Some of our fields did not have adequate water sources for some time, and we've been working on getting the sprinkler systems in under those fields over the last few years in the middle school.
Perfect.
Thanks, Steve. Trevor, I see your hand up next.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. First of all, that was a great presentation, Jen and Krista. I like seeing the success stories. That's always, I'm always happy to see that. Both my kids have gone through all the schools, and it's nice seeing the successes, that happen, especially still such a difficult time. I had a question on, I thought it was during your presentation on youth and family. You said that, I guess, that there was 4 interns, right, working in the school. What type of things are they doing, and are they going through all 4 grades?
Yes, they do meet with students in all 4 grades, and they are doing a range of different things. So they are, some of them are meeting one-on-one with students. Some are meeting with like lunch bunch groups, pulling together groups of students that may need to build additional skills, whether it's building friendships, coping with different concerns or things going on in their own lives. One of them does yoga with the group. So some of them help out with some of our PBIS rewards. We have some opportunities in the day where kids can earn different activities as part of our PBIS program, and they help run some of those PBIS activities. So they're really there as supports for the students in a variety of ways. For the most part, they're working with smaller groups. Occasionally, they are in classrooms working with larger groups, but for the most part, they're doing small group work.
Great. Thank you.
They're very helpful, and thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. Other questions for Jen and Krista? Awesome. Great. Thanks a lot, guys, for your presentation. All right. So Joe and Sheila, I believe you're up next.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, everyone. These are hard acts to follow, but we will do our best. Trent, thank you. Okay, never mind. Just wanted to make sure Trent was going to drive. So this is, I think, my first opportunity to welcome our new board members. I've sat in on a couple of meetings. It's nice to start to get to know you. My name's Sheila Riffle. I am the proud principal here at Old Saybrook High School, and presenting with me this evening is our associate principal. I like to say he puts the prince in associate principal, Mr. Joe Anastasio. Our 2 colleagues who are really heading up this work, Kate Duree and Kara Santapietro, were both unavailable this evening, unfortunately. So we are taking the lead with our climate presentation. And with that, I'm going to just get into the goals. So we had picked up some momentum last year with advisory sessions. There was an advisory program in place many years ago and had run consistently for quite some time. And then as our schedule changed, advisory kind of went out with it. And we had tried to revive it a couple of different years. And I'm proud to say that beginning with last year, certainly with everything COVID and pandemic, we were able to get the advisory back up and running to a degree. We had teachers taking the Yale SEL course. So you're going to hear Joe and I talk about 3 ongoing areas of focus, one of which is actually continuing to develop a robust advisory program that obviously connects with those CASEL standards. An increase in an understanding of social emotional learning, also connected with the CASEL standards. Last year, we, as a staff, we all went through a guided online Yale course throughout the year that was designed to help adults and students potentially start to develop an understanding of what social emotional learning actually is and how it can be practiced. And then this year, we now have actual advisories last year because of the lack of wanting to move around. Because of wanting to move around as little as possible in the building with all the COVID protocols, advisory was really an extension of a class. This year we have separate advisory groups. We've had consistent meetings, and under Joe's leadership, the advisory committee has, excuse me, done a really great job of building advisory activities and lessons to help students develop their understanding of social and emotional learning and how we can connect more with one another and with our school. Joe?
Thank you, Sheila, and good evening, everybody from chilly Brooklyn, Connecticut. Everything is guided by our strategic plan, and the two goals of the three that really jump out to our climate work, equity, and obviously providing a safe and supportive environment. And if anything good came out of COVID, it was that real push toward the focus on the SEL, which is so vital in terms of everybody's sanity and well-being, because if you're not there, it's hard to learn. Next slide. Underneath the umbrella of the strategic plan come the building goals, and they're pretty straightforward and sort of tied in with what we've been talking about. Meeting those social emotional needs in our entire OSHS community. Open communication with students and staff on relevant issues. Earlier in the year, we were struggling with that transition like many districts nationwide because they had been out of school for so long. So we regrouped. We met with students in class meetings. We pushed into classrooms to talk about expectations and behavior. We worked with teachers, partnered with them, continued our restorative practices to sort of get back on track. And obviously, increasing student voice. Tomorrow's advisory is brought to you by Student Voice, because as a result of a survey, this was a topic that students felt that they needed. So they're going to be working on that tomorrow. Next slide.
All right, so I'm going to start off with a couple of slides that created some concern for us. One of which is this one: 52% of students stated they agree there are groups of students who make others feel left out. And in our past climate surveys, this tends to trend with how those responses have been. And whenever we've dug into that with the kids, they speak of it as more of a passive issue than a, nana, nana, boo, boo, you can't sit here kind of issue. And we've also found in talking with kids over the years that some of that comes from, you hear a lot of talk about small towns, small schools, same kids have gone to school together since pre-K. And there's this feeling by the time, amongst some kids, by the time they get to high school, friend groups are set. And even though they certainly shift between middle school and high school, as I'm sure they do between elementary and middle school, this nonetheless is an issue that we continue to try to dig into. Next slide, please, Trent. Thank you. So this is a little bit in conflict with that previous slide. So when you're looking at more blatant issues where students will step up to one another and in support of one another, 60% of our students stated that they felt other students would try to stop kids from making fun of one another. Still not a great number by any means, but between those two different areas, we can deduce that it was a very different start to this year. This is data from the beginning of the year, the pre-strategic plan surveys. I think students have certainly since then found ways to settle in. Our upperclassmen have explored ways to bring the younger students along differently, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at a later time. So, and then we wanted to share that we actually were pleasantly surprised with the 82% of students agreeing that they have input into the process of their learning and how they demonstrate their learning. And when we broke that out by grade level, it was fairly consistent across the board as well. We wondered if maybe that was trending in either in the older grades or maybe the younger grades coming from the middle school, because I know that's something that we've been working on for several years here at Old Saybrook High School. So, while we certainly still have room to grow, and you're going to hear a little bit about shortly, just that whole needing to find common language between students and adults as to what input and student voice really can look like in a high school. But nonetheless, 82%, we're pleased with it currently, but we certainly want to see it improve. All right, next slide, please. Joey.
You're on mute, Joe.
That's because my rogue cat is at the door. I apologize. One more slide, because I think this is the 82% you were talking about, Sheila. This slide here. Now we're there. Yep. So I feel like I'm part of the school. 90% of students feel that they're part of the school. We got to work on the other 10%, obviously. Could this be an outgrowth of the COVID piece for the last couple of years? This was earlier on in the year. But again, we're hoping through advisory and through getting clubs and extracurriculars up and running, this is going to help allay that. Next slide. And staff, we have 96% of staff feel like they are part of the school. So we need to do a little digging for that 4% and see what's going on there. Next slide. Sheila, I think that's you.
Sorry, I'm on my wrong notes here. Okay.
Right.
So count of students who respect one another. So 75% felt that students respect one another. Again, I'm going to be between the advisory lessons, some of the activities we've been able to do gradually over time, and the activities that we hope to be able to do as spring arrives and we can get outside more. I'm expecting, just based on what we're observing in our discipline data and in our general day-to-day observations, that we're going to see this number increase. Joe alluded to this earlier. This survey was given at the beginning of the year, and I do think it's important to note and remember that schools across the country, it was a big talk in education, a big topic rather in education. They're experiencing just varied challenges regarding student behaviors, especially amongst the transitional years, students moving from, being the oldest in one school to the youngest in the next. What we talked a lot about amongst our principals group, our Shoreline principals group, was, in so many schools, eighth graders, they're just becoming eighth graders. Or getting ready for that, being the lead of the school. And, they fell short in seventh grade to go home and be isolated in so many ways. And then when they did return to school, they were kind of returned backward to an elementary model where they had the cohort. And this is no, criticism. This is just the way it had to be. So they had to be in a cohort model. And so they didn't get to interact with a whole lot of different people as you normally would in eighth grade. So coming to high school was a little bit of a culture shock for them. And our sophomores too, I think we're experiencing some of that. Everybody's mentioned restorative practices. We use those frequently at the high school. And we are seeing students maturing into their own as high school kiddos. So pleased with the direction that we're now going in. And of course, those advisory lessons and the SEL focus helps as well. All right. Joe?
Yep, the next two slides showed us a bit of a discrepancy between student and staff perception. So this is something that we need to tease out, but the ever important connecting what you're learning in school to outside of school. This is what we, live and breathe in Old Saybrook, that authentic connection, giving that real life connection is gonna resonate home. And the students surveyed said 65% of what they're learning connects to life outside. But when you jump to the staff, next slide, please. You see 89% feeling that this is happening. So this is 24% higher than the students' belief on the connections. So this would be great data, obviously, to share with the faculty and to see where that disconnect is and to sort of dig it out. And we're already taking a look at the type of assessments we're giving and you know what we're doing in terms of the lessons that we are planning and having those conversations. And ILT has played an important part in that as well. So this is really telling data. We need to know where that disconnect is, essentially. Next slide. So after giving this initial survey, we came up with a couple climate goals. Obviously, continue to create opportunities for kids to connect and become active in the OSHS community. That's vitally important, especially coming off the heels of what we've been through the last couple of years. You know, getting them back, and kids are eager to do that. They really are excited about being able to kind of meet, and gradually we'll be able to meet in, you know, more and more in person, and things will kind of resonate and get back to normal where they can connect even to other communities outside. And our second one is more opportunities for students and staff to share thoughts on issues and brainstorm solutions. So bringing that, you're sort of bridging that gap between the kids and the adults in the building with some of these topics that fall under, you know, our strategic plan, the equity with, you know, the instruction. And obviously SEL, the connections that teachers have made by implementing some of the SEL in their classrooms have been wonderful. It's been wonderful. We're in the process of our mid-year goals now. And I spent some time with a teacher today who brought in some meditation and is utilizing that in the classroom to sort of de-stress. And it's sort of a shared thing that can carry on for the rest of their lives in terms of well-being. So this is something you probably wouldn't have seen 10 years ago, you know, in schools, you know, in terms of teaching the whole child. So it's comforting to see that. Next slide. So challenges. So we had 32% of staff indicated that students are not respecting others' differences. 18% of students indicated that students don't respect others' differences. So again, more information that needs to be teased out. Is that coming from our rocky start, like many schools? Is it the perception that, oh my God, what is happening in my classroom? I'm not used to these behaviors. Whereas the kids who were kind of locked away for a couple of years were kind of like, this is normal. You should see what I'm texting this other kid, you know? So we need to tease that information out. 91% of students believe their teachers care about them. Well, what about the other 19%? You know, where is that disconnect? And is it because of the isolation? Is it something that can be resolved through advisory, through more of that SEL in the classroom, the building relationships, and developing a common understanding of student voice and how it presents in the school? This is an interesting thing. You think student voice and you have one definition in your mind, that the kids have the ability to have some, say, choice in the classroom in terms of how they're going to demonstrate their learning. It's not giving the reins of the school over to the students and letting them run the place either in terms of student voice. So it's that balance and making sure that the adults in the building, the kids in the building, the parents understand it, the community understands it. What does student voice mean? And, you know, kids have to be a part of their education. So that's important. Next slide, please. Some of our successes, 89% of students agreed strongly that when they get upset or angry, they can still make positive choices. And this is something we talked about in terms of self-regulation. And I'd like to give a shout out to Leah O'Connor, who's our district SEL person, and the work she's done at the high school with the advisory committee and with our staff. And she came and ran us through some SEL, because that can kind of be uncomfortable introducing it as a teacher into your classroom. You know, that might be uncharted territory. And she's been instrumental in bridging that. 84% of students indicated they get involved in sports clubs. That's been a push in this district since I've been here in terms of 100% participation. We still want to work toward that. 93% of students indicated they can communicate clearly. So communication is so vital in life in terms of resolving conflict, taking hold of that. And 90% of students agree that adults respect their ideas and opinions. So that respect coming from adults to kids is also important. Next slide, Sheila.
I think
You're on
you're
mute.
on mute.
You're on mute too.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. If I had a dime for every time during the day. We were very proud of obviously this first bullet here. 100% of the students believe that teachers expect them to do their best. And, you know, having that high expectation or expectation of giving it your all, I know that's been a struggle for everybody over the past 2.5 years. So for our kids to right at the start of this year come out with 100% agreeing to that certainly makes me feel good about the messaging that our teachers are sending. 95% of parents in the parent survey said they feel welcome at school. Great number. We still aim for that 5%. We have a communication goal for all teachers this year, trying to just increase that school to home communication. 93% of students feel their teachers care about them. I think in another slide it said 91%. I actually redid the math. It's really 92 for both of them. So it's 92% of students feel their teachers care about them. And as Joe was saying, you know, the other piece to that, however, is 19% didn't identify, said they couldn't identify adult that they would go to in a time of need. So, you know, advisory again, as well as just the relationships that our teachers are building with kids as they get to know them through the year. We are looking for that to improve that number. And then 100% of our staff said they feel they have someone, a colleague or a supervisor they can go to if they have a work-related problem. And that is something, especially during times like this, we want people to feel as though, you know, they can get to someone else to offer them support for whatever they may need. And then finally, next steps. So continue to work on the Castle focused advisory lessons. I echo what Joe said earlier. Leah O'Connor has been a wonderful asset in working with our advisory group and helping focus on social emotional learning. She's actually coming to our faculty meeting tomorrow to give an update on just where social emotional learning is going in the district. And she's just been a wonderful addition to our team. In looking at the open dialogue, advisory is already helping with this. You know, we've found some different ways to have students in focus group discussions this year. We've had students working with advisory early on before advisory started building the lessons. We've had groups of students and parents actually talking with our grading and assessment committee. We've had students building policy. We had a group of students who actually built the dress code policy, composed the dress code policy that's going to be going to the board soon. So very proud to have kids involved in those processes. And then finally, increased opportunities for voice. I mean, obviously it's connected to that last piece, but we had a homecoming dance this year, and the homecoming dance was completely student initiated. Students from student government asked for a meeting with me and Joe. They put together a PowerPoint. They were, you know, COVID safety minded. They had all kinds of pre-planned ideas as to how we could make it happen. And so we were able to talk to our health professionals at school, obviously the superintendent, and go back to them with some things that they needed to shift and revise. And in the end, they made it happen. And it was a big deal. And it was our first opportunity for the upperclassmen to model for the underclassmen what behavior looks like in high school. So that, I believe, I speak for both Joe and I in that started a turning point of that maturity. And it just speaks volumes to how important it is for when they get to high school, them to be able to commingle, even though they don't in many of their classes. As I said earlier, students met and with the superintendent and Mr. A and drafted the revised dress code that's going to be presented. We have two students joining our grading and assessment committee. That committee is exploring school-wide changes in grading to be implemented in the 22-23 school year. And then, our students have presented content information to 8th grade open house with teacher support. In the past, it's been teachers presenting with student support. So, we just need to continue to find those opportunities, and that's going to be a piece of helping us define between students and adults what student voice and choice looks like inside and outside of the classroom. So at this time, we can take questions, and I see Karina. Oh, Tara, are you running the questions?
It's all good, Sheila. I'm willing to share. But yeah, I see you too, Eileen. So, but Karina's up first.
Sure. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. One is, I've heard in each of the presentations a reference to questioning some of the results because the surveys were done at the beginning of the year. So my question is there a reason it was done at the beginning of the year, given that all the COVID stuff was going on? Would it have, is it mandated that it's given at the beginning of the year, or would it have made more sense to do it later on when those 8th graders who are entering freshmen can understand high school a little bit better, and students have more of an understanding of the content being taught to them and knowing whether it's relevant or not to the outside world?
Yeah, so this survey that was done at the beginning of the year doubled as based on a lot of the questions and the way that they're wording a climate survey, as well as getting pre-information going into our first year of the strategic plan. So it is serving as a pre and post. So we are going to be giving the same exact survey sometime in the spring, I believe, Amity, is that correct? I don't want to misspeak here, but sometime in the spring. And that's honestly, I'm looking forward to that, because normally what we do is we give the climate survey as the state typically looks for in the spring, and then we build our goals for the next year based on that last spring's model. And while that certainly makes sense, you're not necessarily comparing apples to apples. So to go beginning of the year and then again at the end of the year, I'm really looking forward to seeing what that shows us.
Yeah, that should give you some good comparative data.
Yeah.
I just have two other questions, and one is a comment. On the list of challenges, Joe, you had mentioned that there was a discrepancy between the students' response to and I'm going to get the wording wrong, but basically what they were being taught was relevant to the outside world, and then the teachers thought that the connections they were making was higher, right? There was a discrepancy. I didn't see that listed on the challenges. And I think that you were right that, I heard you say that you're going to probe a little bit more deeply into why there's a discrepancy there. So I just don't want it to get lost, because I do think it is, it's a valid challenge.
Yep. Thank you for that.
Then the other question I have, and I could be wrong about this, the CASEL standards, are those being replaced by another set? Am I wrong about that? Something tells me CASEL and DESA, are those the same things or are those different? Okay. All right, then I retract my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Karina. So Steve, you're up next, and then Eileen, I'll go to you, and then Alan. So just preview. So go ahead, Steve.
Well, you answered my question. I think it's great that there's going to be an end of the year survey to compare the beginning to the end and see what's changed over the year. So I'm really excited to see that. I'd love to see, if there's improvements, changes, things like that. And then the only other question I have is there any continuity of questions between the different school sets? I'd be really curious to see where the equity questions at the middle school compared to the equity questions at the high school, and then by grade too, and see if we can identify a better area, if there is a difference on race or gender or things, at what grade is that changing and why?
I think that's a great question, and that could be a useful activity for the 3 building administrators or the 3 buildings administrators to sit down and look at those across the board and see if there are any trends.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Steve. Eileen, go ahead.
I'm thrilled that advisory is back. at the high school. I think it's very relevant, especially when we talk about social and emotional learning, just to be able to be face to face in school with other students, because body language tells a lot about how they're feeling, and you can get whomever the adult is that might be leading that advisory, can be able to, share with the administration what they're seeing or finding among the questions that are being asked. So are the questions for advisory, are they ever student generated or have an opportunity to present what they might think is an advisory question that would be relevant?
Yes. For instance, tomorrow's topic is stress management and the advisory committee. Yes, surprise, right? I'm definitely sitting in on it. So that came from student generated interest. In other words, we need more of this. We also have tied advisory with our Link Leader program that ran our orientation at the beginning of the year for our underclassmen. So you'll get students will come in and lead the advisory, or you'll get the upperclassmen mixed with the underclassmen to sort of give advice and that give and take in terms of what interests them. So we're trying to incorporate that, more and more. I feel like we're at, ground level 1 right now, but the committee's fantastic and they're just so excited when they get together, and we're going to be adding students to the committee directly to plan. So it's sort of evolving into a bigger program, and we want to kind of build it organically. What makes sense to our kids and to our staff, and what are the relevant issues that are pressing that we can address through the SEL and tied to the standards. So that's the goal.
And I was going to ask you, how often does advisory meet?
Right now, we're meeting about twice a month. We could be expanding that, depending on the need and where we want to go. You don't want to overdo it, obviously, but you want to keep it relevant and build that connection over time, which is the most important piece.
Definitely. And do you find that when you do advisory, do you mix the grades of students, or do you just keep them, 9 meets of 9 and 10 or 10, and only because of the maturity level? And
right now, primarily it's 9. It's by grade primarily, but the mixing can come in terms of depending on the topic. For instance, like I said, the link leaders who are juniors and seniors will pop into the 9th and 10th grade. And the kids love it. And that's a carryover from the orientation, because they automatically, the younger kids, the 9th graders, connect with the upperclassmen, and they, first week of school, they can see who was with them at Hazen, and who spent time with them. So that connection and building that positive, whereas when we went to high school, we were running in fear. So, that's our goal.
And just lastly, I was just curious that some of the questions that were asked, that you showed the results of the survey, are those ever questions that an advisory group might be able to address as well, so that you can get a sense of more personalization, because you can answer something on a computer, but to really get to the meat and potatoes, that's a really great opportunity, because everybody doesn't have to agree. That's important.
I was going to say pre-COVID, when we were able to hold class meetings, Sheila and I love to disaggregate and bring some of the questions that we felt we needed more information to directly to the kids. And we would do a question and answer series. And that's where we were sort of teasing out this one about, in terms of kids being left out and things like that. We started digging more deeply. And was it more of the typical adolescent cliques? Is it the small town? Is it, I've been stuck with these kids for, 15 years, for crying out loud. So trying to dig that out and bring it directly to the kids as a focus group. And we have taken it in the past years and used it as an advisory topic. So yes.
Super. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Great. Alan, you're up next.
Wow. So just general comments, really. COVID be gone. All this stuff was done because was done before COVID, but it's so important now with the last couple of years of the impact it's had on kids. And you all should feel so good about what you've done with these surveys and with teasing out the challenges and next steps. It's impressive. It's so much information. I just, you should all feel really good about what you're doing and the next steps and what's going to, turn into even better social emotional learning for the kids. And one thing that stands out to me, it's a word, it's empowerment. So it's all about empowering these young kids and soon young adults, adolescents, the whole spectrum from elementary to high school, it's really about empowerment, and everything speaks that you spoke about tonight speaks to empowering the students. So I commend you for that. I did like really the comments that were made about, longitudinally, Karina's comments about, I was thinking the same things, fall versus spring, and also across buildings. I think it's, longitudinally, what are we finding successful year over year? And I don't know that we do that. I guess that's a question to anyone who can answer that. Are we doing any comparative analysis from one year to the next? And I know some of the changes and questions and whatnot, but there are those standard questions. Is that a question someone can answer in terms of year over year longitudinal kind of successes where we're really hitting our mark?
Alan, do you mean across the district and across buildings, or okay?
Yes, yeah. So
Yeah, I think Steve asked that too. Is it, same kind of question? Yeah.
I asked for clarification because I know for several years at the high school, we were keeping kind of a running tab of where, which issues were improving, which ones got worse, and trying to address them and as they came. But I am in support of, the administrations or the climate team sitting down together to say, okay, let's look at some of these questions over time and let's see what we see. I think that could be very interesting.
Appreciate those comments, Sheila. I think there'll be some real value in that as well. There was one other comment I wanted to make. I'm gonna have to find it because I take copious notes and I've lost it somewhere in my notes here. But I think just the connections that are made between the schools, the elementary to the middle to the high school, it's so valuable. And I just, it's impressive to me. I've already said it a million times. So looking forward to those next steps and those challenges. I knew where I was going. So, Krista, you had that, you want to tease out that 6% of the ethnicity piece, and it was so high, but that there's 6%. Why, you want to really dive into that, find out why it's so high and why that, maybe for some reason 6%, what are we missing or what can we do differently or better? So I mean, there's value in every statistic, right? And diving into the weeds is so important. So I commend you all for your work, and I'm done with my comments and questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. I see your hand, Eileen, and actually Trevor's next. So I'm
just
gonna let Trevor.
Thanks. Just a last comment. I was thinking that since we have an increase in English language learners, I'm wondering if this type of assessment is given to them in their own language. And it would be interesting from the perspective of the questions that might be asked is, do you feel left out? Or do you think that you're treated similarly? Because that also really, I think, generates some real healthy conversation, because when you're all of the same, look the same, you might not see that there are inequities, but the increase in multiple languages really has the opportunity to really dive into those feelings by those students. And I don't know how they're being given this. So maybe somebody could say how you're addressing these questions to those that are limited English proficient.
I don't know that I can speak for the high school. I don't know that we translated these, but I know that the kids have tools to translate. I don't know if they were using them, but I don't recall us actually giving a translated version. And, I feel like we're translating everything else. So why wouldn't we do that?
The only thing is sometimes with the translations, they're very concrete and they really don't capitalize on the language in a personal way, just being somebody that speaks several languages. But maybe a thought might be for the foreign language instructors, to be able to give it to some of those students in a smaller group or however you do it. But I think that their response would be very interesting to hear. Thanks, Sheila, so much.
Thanks, Eileen. Go ahead, Trevor.
Okay, thanks. This will be short. Sheila and Joe, I just wanted to thank you. You guys done a great job encouraging your students to get involved. And I've had students there, my two boys, for the last 6 years. And I mean, there's so many kids who get involved in different activities. And I mean, between sports, music, in the community, PTO, everything you can think of. And I've seen you encourage it throughout. So kudos to you. I think you've done a great job of that. So.
Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, and I'll add my own kind of thoughts to the difference between the teachers thinking they're connecting things to the outside world and the students not seeing it. You know, I think students don't know what they don't know. And I think if you had asked me when I was in high school if I would ever use statistics or calculus or algebra, I would have laughed at you and said this has no connection to real world. And yet I find myself as a finance person, you know, doing percentages and statistics in my head, you know, as part of my job. And I would say the same thing about English. You know, I think if you had said that someday I was going to put my, you know, English writing skills to good use, again, I would have thought it was really funny. You know, I was off to go be a pilot. I certainly didn't think I'd ever end up in the corporate world writing for a living. So, you know, I do wonder if that's not part of that differential. You know, it's hard to know what you don't know about how you're going to use the things in life. So just my own 2 cents on that. But yeah, so, and as it's getting late, hopefully any more questions from the board on this? Great. So really awesome conversation. This is always a hot topic, you know, when this comes up to the board. And I think, you know, you hear enthusiasm from us to, you know, to see this data, you know, kind of put into context and, you know, looked at over time. And I think, you know, like you, Sheila, the board is looking forward to seeing what the result will be of the next survey. So we thank you guys for your time tonight. And again, great presentation, really good, useful information. And so just looking down the rest of our agenda for this evening. So the administrators who have, you know, finished their presentations for tonight, feel free to drop. And I'm going to make one executive change just so that we can, you know, move forward on the world language. I think I'm going to bump that up ahead of the assessment presentation. Sorry, Amity. But just to give Monona a chance so that she can get up and go to school tomorrow. But, you know, to the administrators, like I said, that are done presenting, thank you for attending tonight and your excellent presentations. And we'll move on to the world languages.
Thank you.
Would you like me to take over at this point, or Jen?
No, I think I'd like to start if you don't mind. Manon, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for this being here for this long evening. I know that climate's always important, and I know that Amity's presentation will be valuable too. So we're squeezing this really exciting idea in between those 2 big presentations. Back in the spring of last year, we started having conversations at various levels about the opportunity to regionalize, particularly world language programs. So I reached out to my colleagues around us, and unfortunately, this year didn't go like anyone hoped it would. We thought COVID was behind us. And so some of our colleagues dropped out of the conversation. But what we are left with is the start of something very exciting. We began the conversation by asking our colleagues if they had a world language teacher that they could kind of put up to swap with us. It's take the old-fashioned distance learning concept and modernize it. And so we had conversations with a number of districts around us. The one that went the longest was one where they were going to put up a Mandarin teacher, and we were going to invite, actually Manon was very excited and took charge of it because Madame Zumbam also is fluent in German and can teach German. As that looked like it wasn't possible for this year, we started to think about how we could still offer it to our students. This would be a budget neutral opportunity for our students to take German with Manon Zumbam outside of the school day. So this would be with an agreement with the teachers union, which we've had preliminary discussion about and which we have some precedent for even this year. And the reason for doing it outside of the school day is because student schedules would be disrupted if we tried to add it to the school day. And the reason why it's budget neutral is because in this second half of the year, Manon Zumbam does not have one course filled. And this would keep her as a full teacher. It would allow students, and I'm going to have Manon talk about the meeting that she had with students soon. It would allow her to teach this, something she's always wanted to teach in Old Saybrook. So it gives her an opportunity to do that. And as it turns out, we have some student interest to do it. So I'm going to ask Manon to speak, and then I leave it up to the board whether or not you're willing to move forward with a vote to pilot this now. Between now and the end of the year, we'll come back to you with a report on it, or if you need additional information. Manon, do you want to talk about the students and what you're hoping to do?
Yes, thank you so much. Good evening. So over the years, I have heard from students and families that there is an interest for learning German. I am certified, as Mrs. Peruccio has said, in French and German K through 12. So this opportunity, I took it right away and started to throw that out as a chance for students to learn German outside of their regular schedule. But I had to figure out first what really works for them. And I'm quite available. I have two children who are one in college and one in high school senior. So I'm just glad to teach German no matter when. So I met with students about a week ago one morning. The announcement was everyone is welcome if you like to learn German this year. Please come to the cafeteria and I can explain more what this is about. And I had students who came and who were interested fill out a form, a Google form. And since I shared that Google form with the administration and Mrs. Goss and Mrs. Peruccio, I actually had 3 more answers. So altogether on the Google form, 15 students declared that they're interested in taking German. 3 additional students did that on paper. So I have 18 students, and out of those 18 students, I think it was about 95% who said that they would be even interested in continuing to learn German in the future. But focusing right now on this semester, I gave them a choice of when it would work. Choices were 0 hour in the early morning or after school. And so specifically how that would work as a hybrid course is that I would meet with students once a week in person, and then once a week as a synchronous lesson online, and once more a week asynchronously, where I would put up work, learning opportunities for students that they can do on their own time. So the in-person class, I gave the choices of before school or after school or evening hours. And turns out that the majority of students would like to meet right after school at 2:15. And then the synchronous lesson, turns out most students would like to do that in the evening between the hours of 5 and 7. And again, asynchronous would be on their own time. I even had students, actually, it made me chuckle a little bit the last couple of days, tell me that Saturdays would be great too. So, and I'd be up for it. So I really let the kids decide and drive this. I'm just happy that they're interested. And then another little success story is that 3 young women from middle school, 8th grade, came to see me because I teach French at the middle school as well in the morning. They came to see me and they said, we really would like to learn German when we get to the high school. I said, oh, that's great. And I said, yeah, but we can't click on German. I said, you can't? And I was confused. I didn't quite understand why not. And I said, yeah, because we still want to continue French, but we also would like to add German. So central office made that adjustment so that students can actually choose more than one word language as well, which is great, I think, for the kids who would like to do that, to open that opportunity. Anyway, I'm just pleased to be able to give what I know best, which is languages and cultures, back to the students and community of Old Saybrook. If that is something, of course, that the board is excited about as well. So thank you.
What I would like to add is what Manon just said. We've been looking for ways to take what we learned about online learning during the close down of the pandemic and modify it so that it's useful, valuable, that is something that kids can enjoy and really does get them ready for the college experience, because so much of what's going on in colleges now is hybrid. And so there's a lot of bang for the buck in this. I don't mean to use such a crass phrase, but really there's a lot of value in us piloting this so that we can learn about these components. And I don't know if Sheila or Joe want to add anything, or Amity.
I would actually just like to add that, I mean, we've been talking for a few years about how wonderful would it be if we could create a high school schedule that more closely emulates a post-secondary schedule where courses have flexibility and kids can see when they're being offered and actually choose based on other things they have in their lives. So for Manon to take the initiative and take the lead and start to pave the way for this type of a model is really exciting. I also want to take the opportunity to give Manon Zumbaum so many compliments, because she is, Manon shifts her thinking all the time. She's constantly looking for different ways to present instruction, different ways to do things. She's constantly reflecting and questioning her own practice to make it better. It's just an excellent model for the rest of our staff. And Manon, I just, I think the board really needs to hear that about you. So thank you for all you do and how much you care about just teaching kids in whatever way they need it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sheila. Any questions or comments from the board? Go ahead, Karina.
Thank you. I just think this is wonderful. I think it's a tremendous creative approach. And just to echo what others have said, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for kids to learn a different language that hasn't normally been offered in the school. So I think it's very, very exciting.
Awesome. Steve, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Easy questions. One, what would we need to do as a board to make such an event happen? And two, any ideas of expanding that program? I have a third grader who requests to learn German, and German and Russian he would like to learn.
So to answer your procedural question, so opening up to questions and discussion, and as soon as that's over, I'll ask for a motion to support or approve piloting the German program. So
I can answer the second question if you like.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Steve, we often use a piloting mechanism to just kind of beta test things. It's a one class. Let's see how it goes. Let's see what the interest is. I would like to say that my vision for this, and I think Manon's and everyone else is involved, is that this could potentially grow not only with our own students, but also let's get some of the other districts around us to buy into this concept of sharing. Let's start with world language teachers, and then, because that's a nice, easy swap, and then find other ways. And we've been reassuring, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, this is not a way to cut teachers. This is a way to create programming. So that students like your third grader will have an opportunity to take things like this when they get to the high school. That we will not be tied to the enrollment that's specific to what we have in front of us, that we can be thinking about students from other schools. And this is, I know many of you were in the Board of Finance meeting earlier. This is not unlike what I was saying to the Board of Finance. We're looking for regional answers all the time, whether that's back office, as in where we buy insurance, or right out front and how we program for our students and how we offer opportunities that are regional. This is the way we have to go, all around us, not just Saybrook. I'm working on convincing others, and it's really important that we go in this direction. And Manon really just took this and ran with it.
Steve, did you have a follow-up question? I saw your hand come back up. And I think you're on mute.
I did have a follow-up question. And just has this been I hate to be the bearer, has this been discussed with the union, and is there any effects in the contract? Or is the union in support of this type of thing? I'm in support of it, but I just don't want us to cause any headache further down the road.
Oh, no, we don't. Yeah, we were very careful about that. We already have, before the regular school day classes running at the high school, and we've recently added one after school class at the high school, was part of a regular class. And it didn't need board action. We just took a lab out of the day and moved it after school, so that all the kids could still have access to it, but it didn't interfere with other things. I've had preliminary conversations. We do not have a signed agreement yet. I wanted to come to you first, but I have every reason to believe that they will be supportive of it based on the conversations I've had.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Go ahead, Eileen, I see your hand.
Yep, so I'm definitely in support of the pilot course. My question is, how does, and maybe Jan or whomever can answer this, do they not need a certain amount of credit hours or hours in the classroom somehow, some way to be able to get credit for this class? So initially, this would run beginning second semester, is that right? If we agree to this, it would be start in the spring or right now, or?
Start right now.
Would start right now. And then with that, from now until June, would students then be getting like credit for this particular segment? Because
Yes.
I'm not familiar with how many credits they need to get when they, for the foreign language, and do they need to be, as I said, a certain number of hours, or, because I didn't really understand that too well.
So yes, in the graduation policy, Eileen, you have all of the hours spelled out for the minimum requirements needed to graduate. I'm imagining for these students, it sounds like this will be above and beyond as far as their world language credits go. Although I don't know, Manon can probably speak more about that, but they would earn credit for it. The good thing is, in the board's graduation policy, we not only have seat time language, we also have mastery-based diploma language. So that allows us to be creative about things like this hybrid course, where they're going to meet in person, they're going to meet online, and then there's going to be an asynchronous component where students may be asked to work together on a Saturday, or to do some work and submit it. I'm teaching a class at one of the state universities right now, and that is the format that we're using for a class that meets only once a month in person. So very, very collegiate, I think, in the way we're approaching it, and also just solves so many problems, scheduling problems for students, access to the class, the ability to fit it into a teacher's schedule, and if we can continue this and get other school districts to be involved with us, we don't have to worry about their schedule versus our schedule. That won't matter.
And just lastly, is our foreign language like a year-long class, or is it a semester?
I'm happy to answer. Most of the classes, they're year-long classes, but it's easy to semesterize any of these.
Okay, so this is going to be a pilot, but if it's something that really students are really enjoying, is that something that you would project might be for a year's more traditional based foreign language? I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, for the course.
Classic requirement for world language. So yes, or because it's such an interesting hybrid, we might not think of it as year long. We might think of it as satisfying a certain number of hours plus a certain mastery-based component. This really could push that thinking forward. And it could be a great opportunity to try out a number of things moving forward. That wouldn't be this year, but moving forward.
Thanks so much.
Alan, I see your hand up.
Well, I'm just trying to be proactive again, Tara, and was wondering if there was a motion so I could weigh in on that.
So I'll ask for any other questions or comments.
Of course. Yeah, so I think it's wonderful that Manon really is enthusiastic about this, and for all the things that you said, Jan, preparing kids for college, giving these opportunities and the ability to share resources with their districts, all the things you said, it's great. I can't imagine why we wouldn't support something like this. So thank you.
Well, if you would like to make the motion, Alan, then I will put it forth for the board, a motion to accept the pilot German program as presented. Alan was first, Eileen second. All in favor, aye, or a show of hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Manon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate it. A real quick little story about connections with what we learn in life. English was my least favorite subject in Germany and my worst grade. And I was a good student, but English was not my love for sure. And I said to my teachers and my family, I said, I will never live in a country where I have to speak English. So, and then there we go. So I always tell my students that story. You just never know what will come in handy later in life. Just learn it now.
So true.
All right. Thank you and good night.
Thank you so much. And Sheila and Joe, thanks for staying on with us too. So, all right. So back to Amity and our assessment presentation.
Okay, I'm going to give it my best shot to share my screen. I think it will let me do that. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so as you've heard several times tonight, we have been really focused on our new strategic plan goals. And with that, we also refocused on our mission statement. This has been our mission statement for well before I have been back in district, and I think predates Jan joining the district. This is just, it's only been updated, but maybe with a tweak of a word here or there. And so this is what we have been trying to do as long as any of us can remember. And within that is our vision of a learner. So that was what we were calling our profile of a graduate before, but our vision of a learner is really designed to encompass every student in our district from preschool until graduation. And when we think about those two things, all of our assessments and all of the information that we share about our district really needs to align with those two ideas, the mission and our vision of a learner. And this presentation is designed hopefully to do that. Again, our connections to the strategic plan, these three goals are the strategic goals that should help us achieve that mission and that vision of a learner. And they're the same ones that you've seen several times tonight, so I'll speed on past. We also have sort of a different way of looking at assessment data this year, because it has occurred to me through working with the Columbia Center for Public Leadership and Research that for research and public leadership, that we have many levels of data that can really give us more information about how our district is doing. And we certainly don't want to skip any of them, but together they provide a much more complete picture. And they also address pieces of what we do in schools that are important to our mission and to our vision of a learner and to our strategic plan goals, but that don't necessarily show in that standardized test data. So if you look at this slide, it talks about the difference between satellite data, map data, and street data. And if you think about sort of your Google Maps or your Apple Maps on your phone, you can imagine that satellite data is really that very high level data that is very important for seeing where we are in the world, but not necessarily clear in providing a picture for what's happening at a more specific local level. Map data is data that is more focused on our local conditions, but not necessarily individual classrooms or individual students. So it sort of tells us about a school or about a particular program or how we're doing with communicating, but it doesn't necessarily get to the student level. Street data really gets that look that you're driving around and seeing what's happening right at that street level, you will see what happens in classrooms. If you're using street data, you'll hear students' words, you'll see student work, you'll hear from educators about what they're observing in the classroom. And those three kinds of data together should really provide us a fuller picture that will help us as we move forward and sort of think about how we're doing as a district. Here you can see some satellite data. These are our graduation rates as they've been given back to us by the state. We provide them with the data and then they provide this information back to us. And you can see here some important things about our district. You can see students who, you can see how students who graduated are English learners. It looks from this data like 50% of our English learners graduated in 2021. Of our students who identify as 2 or more races, it looks like only 33.3% graduated. There's a disparity between our male and female graduation rates. And what's interesting to note is that this data is very different than in other years. Usually, and over the past 5 years, our graduation rate data showed that 100% of our students of 2 or more races graduated, 100% of our English learners graduated. The disparity between male and female was smaller, and many more of our students who qualify for special education graduated. So this is an interesting thing to note, that satellite data gives you important information about what our graduation rates looked like in 2021, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So the map data there is thinking about the cohort size. And if you look at that data, you might recognize when it says English learners 50%, odds of getting a 50% number wouldn't really be with us unless those were 2 students. The 33.3 suggests to me that that's 3 students. So it's very interesting to sort of consider cohort sizes in terms of these rates and what they mean in our district. Also, graduation rates are different in this past year because of the pandemic impact to families in the community, specifically sort of economic impact in students who may have left school to work. But what's interesting here is if you understand that street data, you understand that the stories are really, really different than what you would get from the satellite data. I can't give you specific examples of the students who may or may not have graduated last year because that would breach confidentiality. But what's listed here are 7 different kinds of reasons why students sometimes do not graduate with their original cohort. Sometimes they do leave school, what we would consider withdrawal from school because they're going to work full time. But also we have students who transfer to our high school as seniors and they don't have the credit to graduate yet. We have students who experience health issues, addiction issues, mental health issues, all kinds of issues that might prevent them from attending school at that moment, but they'll be able to graduate at a later point. We have students who have gaps in school experience. We have students who may not have been to school in many years and not necessarily pandemic related, but related to something else in their lives. We've had in the past students who've become parents and leave for adult ed. We've had students who become Old Saybrook residents, but they aren't necessarily attending our school. But then if they become Old Saybrook residents, they become sort of the connected to us so that they impact our cohort graduation rate. And we also have students who continue in our 18 to 21-year-old program, which is a special education program. It's very appropriate that we continue to educate some students beyond their 18th birthday. And but those students who continue in that program, though it is mandated by state law, they are considered not graduating within the 4-year cohort. And so that counts against us in graduation rates. So we have more satellite data here. Our students reaching English proficiency on the Lost Links assessment. And you can see that over the last several years. You can see that as our number of English learners has grown, also our percentage of students reaching English proficiency has grown. This slide shows how our number of English learners, as this is really map data, over time we have grown significantly in our population of students learning English. And in fact, that number 77 is the official state number for this year that was collected on October 1st. But the reality there is that today we have 86 English learners. So it's interesting to note how quickly that number is climbing for us. And then another piece of map data related there is our number of students earning the seal of biliteracy by the time they graduate. That number also has grown over the last couple of years. It was a new opportunity for students in 18-19, and already we have significantly grown in our ability to help students reach that level of biliteracy. And then street data. These are actual student stories. This information was published in our district, so it's not breaching confidentiality to share it with you. We do have this student's permission to share his story here. But it's interesting to see how many things he's involved in that really do exemplify our vision of a learner. He's involved inside and outside of the classroom. He is engaged in his community, and he's working toward achieving his highest aspirations. So when you think about our vision of a learner, you don't necessarily see the whole story by just looking at that satellite level data. You really need to see this street data and get to know the kids and what they're doing. This is satellite level data for the next generation science assessment that is administered in grades 5, 8, and 11. And interestingly here, none of these students represented on this slide are the same students. So the students who took the test in 2018-19 are not the same students that we have data on from 2020, 2021, because if you follow, if you think of somebody who was a 5th grader in 18-19, they are not an 8th grader in 2021. So these are different students, different cohorts, but you get sort of a general sense of how we're doing with our science education in our district. The street data, though, shows really specifically what kinds of work our students are able to do. This is an example from a grade 5 student who was working with some information about water conservation and which uses more, a shower or a bath. And students work together to create sort of scenarios and to solve that problem. And they use their research skills, they use their math skills, and they use their science skills. And some more street data. This is from a high school student, marine biology students. We're looking at the carbon, water, and nitrogen cycles in the Earth's spheres, and they built ecospheres that actually modeled that. And they were challenged to sort of be able to maintain that little goldfish in there for a month and make sure that he was able to survive. This is some more satellite data. These are our Smarter Balanced Assessment math achievement scores for this past year and all the previous years. I know it's just lovely rainbow color coding, but what that really is that shows you the same color is the same group of students over a period of time. And you'll notice if you look from 18-19 to 2021, you see a jump in those colors. So you will see, for instance, the 3rd graders in that light blue then become the 5th graders in light blue because there was no testing in 1920. So you can sort of follow those students across the board. The Connecticut numbers are here just for sort of understanding of context. You will see that we did have not the kind of growth we were hoping for last year. In 18-19, we'd had some very strong growth. And then this past year, we saw a drop off in those results. And I will talk more about that as we move on. But I would like you to notice specifically that 8th grade math, 33% of students reaching the goal, that same cohort of students then was tested as the PSAT grade 9 students on this slide. And already 52% of that group had reached that benchmark. It's not the same test, so you can't say that those are directly transferable, but those scores have been sort of looked at side by side over a period of time by the State Department of Education, and they believe that the Smarter Balanced Assessment is an accurate predictor of SAT performance, which suggests to us exactly what teachers told us when we asked them about those scores on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. And they said students were exhausted. When they took those tests at the end of last year, they were just done. And they didn't invest themselves in sort of doing their best work on that test because they were just fatigued. They had, sort of COVID fatigue like so many of us. And so we didn't necessarily see the kind of performance that we might expect to see from those students based on their knowledge and their ability to perform in the classroom every day. And this sort of helped us to say, yes, that might be accurate, because already those students have rebounded on yet another standardized test that they took in October of this year.
While Amity's switching slides, I just want to say to the board, interestingly enough, we're talking about the use of technology. The SAT is going online in 2024. So you're actually entering the last full year of SAT the old-fashioned way.
So then this is some street data. This is what some student work looks like in math, just a random sampling of some things, some artifacts that we've been collecting. Geometry students were learning some constructions. And so you see on the right-hand side of the screen there, sort of a traditional way of doing that assignment. These were, by the way, the same assignment. Students had a lot of voice and choice in how they demonstrated their learning here. And if they wanted to do it the traditional way, that was certainly an option. But they were challenged that if they wanted to do it in a more artistic representation, that they were welcome to do that as well. And interestingly, the student reflections were that it was incredibly challenging to apply the ability to scale and create those constructions, those geometric shapes, was very difficult to actually do when applied to an artistic work. And they were appreciating the rigor of that. This is some student work in math at an elementary level. Interestingly here, these are some pretty challenging things. These are learning targets that the students were self-assessing. How well can they do this? And things like, I can add and subtract decimals to hundredths. I can multiply a number by powers of 10 and explain what happens to the number of zeros in the product and why the decimal point moves over. So those are some pretty important skills, and students are aware that that's what they're working on, and they're able to assess their own ability. And of course, a teacher assesses this as well. But the self-reflection involved with trying to decide how well you do this is really important to learning. This is some more satellite data. This is our Smarter Balanced Literacy. And again, you can see this over time. There were some really interesting things in this data. The color coding, again, reflects the cohorts. The same color is the same group of students. And there were some anomalies here as well. For some reason, kudos to them, our third graders did exceptionally well. And the teachers suggested that that might be because one thing that students were able to do when they were quarantined was read. And so maybe we had a lot more kids reading for pleasure, reading online, you know, sort of having access to books and more time to use them. So that was one really pleasant surprise among our third graders. And you can sort of see again, I don't want to try to camouflage it here. That's not the point. We had drops in our assessment performance in last spring's assessments. And this is SAT literacy. Again, these were administered, PSAT was administered in the fall, SAT was administered last spring. So that grade 11 number is last spring in 2021, and the other numbers are this fall for the PSAT. And here's some student work, some street data. This is the kind of thing that students are doing in classrooms. They were looking at, they were doing archetype analysis, and they applied that to movies and to characters in movies. And it made it more memorable for them, and also made them sort of truly understand what those characters look like. And they apply that in the literature reading that they're doing together. And then in another class, students were working on interviewing. So they were preparing for their interview, and they were writing open-ended questions. And then they were working on creating a story from the interview that they were able to do. And here's some street data that you don't see. This is not connected in any way to these sort of larger scale satellite data assessments. You don't get to see good work like the work our students are doing in the wood shop. And you look at that scrap wood in that left-hand picture, and then you look at that amazing pen that the student created. The precision of, you know, in order to be able to do that, the precision to work with materials like that is very challenging and was very rigorous, but you don't see that in the statewide assessment data. Our chorus students actually chose the song that they were going to perform at the concert, but they didn't just pick at random. They collaborated to create criteria for what would be a good song to share at a concert. And then they applied that criteria to a number of pieces of music to make their decision. Our tech ed students, our engineering students created towers that could support at least 120 pounds, but they were no bigger than 3 by 8 and they could have no more than 4 sides. So this is an example of one of those. And then health students chose a project from a whole lot of different projects that was to be about a health related topic that they were studying. And this is an example of some of the work done there. And this is from our Spanish 4 class. Students were asked to keep journals as they were watching a documentary together, and they kept those journals obviously in Spanish in this case. And then back to some satellite data, our climate survey data. You've certainly seen a lot of that this evening, but this is just one example of that satellite level data. Students can establish and maintain healthy relationships. 92% of students agreed or strongly agreed, 98% of parents agreed or strongly agreed, and 100% of teachers agreed or strongly agreed. So that is some strong evidence that things are going well in that area. And then the map data, though, shows a little more interesting in-depth picture. We see here that in 1920, about 15% of our students looked like they had some elevated needs in the social emotional area. And then in 2021, it was a different assessment. So you can't compare them directly, but you can get a general idea. Our students averaged in the spring, about 16% of students needed some additional support in those social emotional areas. And then this fall, again, back to the back. So a different assessment from 2021, but in 21-22, it looks like last fall about 18%. But that number, interestingly, matches beautifully with the 2021 fall percentage of students. So it'll be interesting to see when this is administered in the spring, what that looks like for students. Again, these are different measures, different assessments, but it's important to sort of look across the data and say, all right, so how are our students doing? It looks like over time, we have a slightly elevating need as the pandemic wears on. So our challenges are that traditional measures of school success are really a satellite view of a small part of what we teach in school and a small part of what we're looking to measure in measuring progress toward our vision of a learner and toward our mission. They don't include 21st century skills like initiative and collaboration and curiosity. They don't include the visual and performing arts. They don't include career skills like internships and skill-focused electives. They don't include extracurricular learning like sports and clubs, and they don't include social emotional health and well-being. So that's why it's important to share with you all these different levels of data, because you get a much fuller picture. Our successes are that the data really validates our strategic plan goals. You know, we worked really hard to make sure that we were hearing lots of voices across the community, lots of students and parents and community members to tell us what it was that we should be focusing on in the next 5 years. And a lot of this data really validates the fact that our community told us the right things, that equity, high quality instruction, and well-being really are good places for us to be focusing our attention over the next 5 years. And our next steps are to continue to work to ensure that our satellite data better reflects our street data. So I am very proud of the street data that I shared with you this evening, and I'm not sure that our standardized test results look like the kind of work that we see students doing in class every day. We recognize that some of that may be the way that the students took the test last spring and the fact that they felt tired and fatigued and maybe didn't put in their best effort. But putting that aside, we said to ourselves, what could we do to make sure that our satellite data better reflects our street data? And we realized that we need to expose students to the format and the tools that are involved with those standardized tests. So we will this year implement at least one sort of interim, they're called interim assessment blocks. They are sort of little pre-tests that you can give students, partially to expose them to the tools and partially as formative assessment data to let us know how we might expect students to do on the full version of the test. And also, we specifically in math, but have traditionally waited as late in the testing window as we could, because we heard from teachers, I want to get through as many units as possible. And I really don't want to test students early in the test window. The test window is traditionally open at the end of March, and we have not usually tested until after April vacation. What we saw in our data from last spring was that the later we waited to test, the lower the scores were. In fact, those 8th grade math scores, that was the very last test administered in the district. So we recognize that even though we need to strike that balance between making sure we have all of the units sort of under the kids' belts, we need to make sure that we are also testing early enough in the assessment window that kids aren't just checked out and really tired of sort of doing school by that point. We also need to make sure that we continue embedding the 21st century skills in all of our curriculum, because when we look at our vision of a learner and our mission, a lot of what's there is related to those 21st century skills: collaboration, communication, initiative, curiosity, innovation. All of those things are really important to preparing our students for the future. And we need to continue to measure that in addition to all that we get through the state assessments. And we need to report progress on those 21st century skills to students and families regularly. We're kind of pulling in more grade levels, doing that each year. And we need to continue on that path. And we also need to help students market their 21st century skills to colleges and employers. Because if we're going to invest time teaching these skills and measuring these skills and sharing that information out, we need to make sure that colleges and universities and employers understand why that's important and understand what we've invested in there. We also need to continue increasing supports for social emotional well-being. That is really supported by Leah O'Connor's work, but it is supported because we are using formative assessments to target specific skills that students need through programs like advisory, and making really challenging and relevant classroom experiences. There's a lot of data to suggest that the more challenging and relevant your classroom experiences are, not only do academics improve, but also climate improves. And we need to make sure that we have equitable access to all school experiences for all of our students. So across demographic barriers, we need to make sure that everybody has those equitable opportunities. And we need to increase focus on social emotional skill building. We have to teach this. We can't just measure it. We need to teach students how to be successful with their social emotional learning. So I've tried to do the quick version. What do you notice? What do you wonder? What questions do you have?
All righty. Any questions or comments for Amity on her presentation? I see you, Eileen, go ahead.
Just real quick, because it's getting late. Fabulous presentation. I love seeing the way we're talking about how students can apply their knowledge in school and how to use it outside in so many ways. So my question is, in the street data, when you talk about student work in math, is that how the district is moving now with all their units, so that children, even starting at Goodwin, are being able to reflect on, I need to learn this skill, or I can do this sometimes, or I can do this well easily? Is it random, or is this being developed so that, you know, there's consistency in, say, all the 3rd grades or all the 2nd grades? Or
we're really fortunate that Bridges and Illustrative Math build those reflections and self-assessments into the program.
Wow.
And I think the middle school has done a great job specifically of posting learning targets, so that they've discussed with kids what it is they're focused on learning. But the self-assessments are built into our programs. We're fortunate that way.
And it's interesting because if you take it one step further, as Tara was saying, if you look at these and you say, what is the relevancy? Why do I need to know this? And I probably am the first one to probably say, I was wondering why I needed to take geometry. What's that for? So, you know, and so I'm just, from this, I think the more students get an opportunity to see something practical, you know, and this is, then they'll be like, oh, okay, as opposed to just words.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we agree.
Super.
Thanks, Eileen.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments for Amity?
Just a comment.
Okay,
you know, I like the one slide about the geometry and the artistic illustration of, and the, you know, the traditional way. I mean, people, right brain, left brain thinkers, and how they learn. And I think that you're giving them the choice of how they want to do it, right? And I think that's great. It's important.
Thank you.
Great
We have wonderful
presentation.
teachers thinking of these things.
Thanks, Ellen. Any other questions or comments? Super interesting, Amity, as always.
You're kind.
No, it is. I mean, it's really, I mean, like, it's one of those things that you could spend a lot of time diving into, you know, all those, like, especially the rainbow thing, you know, going across and everything. Oh, Eileen, you got another comment?
No, I was just saying that it's just these are the things that kids will remember when they graduate. They don't remember sometimes all the things that are just kind of being, you know, poured in terms of everything language based. But when you look at this, where you're talking about street data on health students, I mean, that could be done even at Goodwin School, you know, create something like, you know, if you get the measles or you get something, what do you look like? How do you feel? So I think that it's terrific. Thanks for sharing all this.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Amity. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you all.
All right. So next up, Jan, is a residency request.
Sorry, I've misplaced my paper in the pile of paper sitting in front of me.
Give me a chance to say goodnight to Alex. So it's all good.
Yeah, found it. There you go. Good. I'm glad we could do that for you. Yes. So a little bit more description for newer board members. Sometimes we have families who are either moving out of town or perhaps getting ready to close on a house and moving into town. And we allow students either to enroll in the school or to stay enrolled in the school through a period of time. This is usually done through the Board of Education with a recommendation from me. And I am bringing to you a request to keep a student, you have this in your packet, who is currently at Kathleen E. Goodwin, requesting that he remain enrolled at Kathleen E. Goodwin through the end of the academic year, rather than moving him out of the community now. I think it would be a challenge for him to adjust at this point. This has the support of both of the building principal and associate principal, and I ask that you consider it.
So moved.
All right, so motion made by Eileen, seconded by Karen. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. All right, so Karen, on to you with our National School Counselor Appreciation Proclamation. I'm sorry it's so at the end of the program because it's so timely, but
we usually invite them. We've been in the practice the last few years of inviting someone, but I knew this was going to run long tonight. So I decided the best gift we could give them was to have them stay home. And instead we share the proclamation with them.
True.
And I think you're on mute, Karen.
There we go. All set. On behalf of the Old Saybrook Public Schools District, I would like to recognize February 7th through February 11th, 2022 as National School Counseling Week. School counselors are employed in our schools to help students reach their full potential and are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development. They also help parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children. In addition, they work collaboratively with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves, and they help students navigate through challenges they face in every aspect of their lives. Our school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society. Old Saybrook Public Schools considers the comprehensive developmental school counseling program to be an integral piece of the educational process that enables our students to achieve success in school and in life. On this day, Tuesday, February 8th, 2022, a date and time when school counselors are in waiting to address increasingly complicated issues, the school district formally commends the school counselors employed by our district. And this proclamation is signed by Tara Barrows, our Board of Education chairperson.
Thanks, Karen and Kathy. I'm glad you're on. Yay. Yay, your team. Thanks for hanging in there with us tonight. And thanks for reading that for us, Karen. I appreciate it. All right, so the student reports were available to all of us to read. So they're not with us I'm not going to take questions on that. And then Karen, correspondence.
Yeah, I'm still, okay. Yeah, we actually have two pieces of correspondence. Both of them are in the board's notebook. The first one is from CABE, Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, announcing that Old Saybrook has once again been awarded the Bonnie B. Carney Award of Excellence for Educational Communications. I think our second year or third, at least our second year.
The second year, I believe, yeah.
Which is great. So congratulations to, I think Trent has a lot to do with that. Trent.
Yeah.
And then the second piece of correspondence is an email from a parent expressing concern about masking our students in school.
Excellent.
And that's it.
So those are on the board notebook.
They are.
For everybody to read. Thank you, Karen. All right. So reminders, our next Board of Education meeting is on an odd night. It's on Wednesday, the 23rd. That was due to just some scheduling conflicts and also winter break. And also, I just want to apologize to everybody for the confusion about tonight and when we were starting. But I do want to, I know there's concern actually that Eileen raised that the Board of Finance didn't see your names on the Zoom call, and they actually did. We could see your names on the Zoom call. So even though you were not a panelist, but a participant, your names are still on the Zoom call. Karina, do you have a question?
Did we lose?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Did we lose the 23rd as a snowflake day, or is it still? We haven't lost it yet, right?
We haven't lost
the snowflake day.
Great, thank you. Sorry.
No, I mean, yeah, exactly. Trust me, I'm very invested in that as a snowflake day as well.
And we have 5 days ahead of us with nothing in it. Let's just pray for the next week.
So, but yeah, so thank you. Good question, Karina. And so again, I apologize for the confusion tonight and the late meeting and etc. So with that, I'm looking at you, Steve Beeler, looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Steve.
Make a motion.
Seconded by Trevor. All in favor? Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.